We continue now at the top of Daf Zayin Amud Beis in Meseches Pesachim. This is Pesachim Daf 97b. The Gemara is trying to find a case according to Rebbe where a carbon chatas would not be allowed to die, an avuda carbon chatas, meaning a carbon chatas that had got lost and had been replaced, where you won't allow it to die, but rather you're going to allow it to graze until it gets a mum. And the Gemara says, Kid Rav Oshia, you find a case like Rav Oshia has a case. Diyamar Rav Oshia, because Rav Oshia said, Hifresh shtei chatos la'achrayas. Let's say a person separated two chatos for achrayas purposes. Rashi over here explains. The achrayas shim tovad ha'achas yavi chavert. In other words, it was like an insurance. The person said, if one of them gets lost, I'll bring the other. Now you could ask on this, that's not really called avuda. We're trying to find the case where it gets lost. In the end, the Gemara is going to ask a different question, so we're not going to ask that question. But in any case, this is going to be the case over here where you have two chatos, liachrayis, in case one gets lost, you have another one. So mischaper biachas mehen, so Rav Oshia says one of them is used as a kapara, ushniya tira, and then the second one is going to be left to graze, and that will be Rebbe's case, where it is left to graze. But the Gemara asks, it's not a good example of a case. Va'ilu bePesach ki agavna karav shlamim. If you have the exact same case by Karban Pesach, the halacha actually is it's brought as a Karban Shlamim. Rashi over here says, Va'ilu bePesach ki agavna karav shlamim. Dahainu moser haPesach gomor. Sharei lakach hofresh vein kan dichoy. That is a classic case of moser haPesach. I separated two animals. I'm only intending on bringing one. That's not called dichoy. That's a classic case of moser haPesach. It's extra from Karban Pesach. It wasn't needed for a Karban Pesach. So of course in that case it's brought as a shlamim. So that doesn't help our rule either. So instead, the Gemara says, Ela Shmuel Rabbi Shimon Svirle. What you have to say is that Shmuel really holds like Rabbi Shimon. Diyamar Chomesh Chatos Mesos, who says the 5 cases of carbon chatos are all left to die. Rashi over here explains. Ela Loti Boy Roe Bechatos Hecha Mashkachasla. Don't ask this question of how do you ever have a case where a carbon chatos is left to graze. To Shmuel, Rabbi Shimon Svirle, Shmuel holds like the Tana Rabbi Shimon. Diyamar b'Meseches Tmura Chomesh Chatos Mesos Hanizkaros Lamisa Mesos Hein Bechol Inyonim Shata Motze. Rabbi Shimon holds when we talk about 5 carbon chatoses that all die, they die under all circumstances. There are no circumstances where they are left to graze. The chatos shekipru ba'aleo mesa becholshi bein shenimtzas kodem kapora, bein shenimtzas la'achar kapora, bein shehifrisha la'achrayis, mesa hanosers. In all situations, if you had a replacement carbon chatos, the original dies. Doesn't matter if it's found before the kapora, after the kapora, etc. There is no case where it's roa, which of course presents to us another problem. So that's what the Gemara asks. Roa Rabbi Shimon less klal. But Rabbi Shimon doesn't have any case of roa, and therefore Shmuel's statement doesn't make sense because, as Rashi says, Umayhi dekamar Shmuel kol shebechatas roa. What does Shmuel mean when he says in any situation where a carbon chatas is roa, the carbon pesach is going to be roa? That statement doesn't make sense if, according to Rabbi Shimon, there are no cases of roa. And so the Gemara answers, Shmuel nami chodaka amar. Shmuel also was only saying a one-sided rule. All he meant was as follows: Kol shebechatas mesa, in any situation where a carbon chatas is left to die, ba pesach karev shlamim. When it comes to carbon pesach, it is brought as a carbon shlamim. Umay kamashmalan, and what is Shmuel's chiddush in saying this halacha lafukim min Rabbi Yochanan? He simply means to exclude that which Rabbi Yochanan said. Because Rabbi Yochanan held that a carbon pesach, let's say you had a carbon pesach that was lost, it's only brought as a shlamim if it was found after the shchita, so there wasn't any dichoy. But according to Rabbi Yochanan, if you find it before shchita and then you bring the replacement, that's considered dichoy. You pushed it off, and in such a situation, you don't bring it as a carbon shlamim, you allow it to graze. Alma shchita kava. You see, according to Rabbi Yochanan, that the shchita is the koveya. Kamash Malon chatzos kava. That's what Shmuel is coming to teach us, that we don't care about the shchita. All we care about is chatzos. As long as you find the animal after chatzos, so then even if it's before shchita, that's not considered dichoy, and that animal is going to be brought as a carbon shlamim. And now the Gemara continues with a slightly different version of the entire discussion we had before starting in the previous Amud. This next line is going to be an exact repeat of the question the Gemara asked earlier. Is just going to be a different answer. Lishna Achrin, another version is as follows. V'ilu b'Pesach heicha do'avad v'nimtza achar chatzos kodem shchita yikraf shlamim. That's an exact repeat of the question on the previous Amud. The Rabbanan had said that kodem shchita by a chatos, it's roeh. We leave the animal to graze. That was the Rabbanan's opinion as opposed to Rebbe. Whereas by carbon chatos, the Gemara had asked, if the original was lost and it's found after chatzos but before shchita, you bring it as a shlamim, because even though it was before shchita, we don't call that dichoy because it's after chatzos. So the Gemara answers, now in this version, a different answer, Shmuel kerabba svirale. Shmuel actually holds like Rabba, Diyamar shchita kava. Shmuel actually holds that shchita is the koveya. So if shchita is the koveya, that means that if it's found before shchita, then the shchita of the replacement animal is considered dichoy. You're pushing off the original, and you don't bring it as a shlamim. It's actually roh. It's consistent with the Rabbanan's position by carbon chatos. But the Gemara doesn't like this answer. But Rabbi Yochanan's the one that says that a carbon pesach is only brought as a shlamim if it's found after shchita. Avol kodem shchita lo, but before shchita no. Rabbi Yochanan's the one that says that before shchita it's going to be considered dichoy, it's going to be roeh. Alma shchita kava. You see, according to Rabbi Yochanan, he's the one that says shchita kava. Michlal de Shmuel savar chatzos kava. That implies that Shmuel holds that it's chatzos that's the koveya. So we still have this question, that how is Shmuel consistent with the opinion of the Rabbanan? And the Gemara answers in this version, Ela Shmuel kerebi svirale. Rather, you have to say, and again, this is what the Gemara said in the previous summit also, it's just coming to the conclusion by a different route. You're going to have to say that Shmuel holds like Rebbe, Diyamar avuda lemisa azla. Because Rebbe holds that in situations of avuda, it's always lamisa. Shmuel disagrees with the position of the Rabbanan, that in this particular case, you're going to say that it's not lamisa, but it's roeh. The Gemara says, 1 second, va kol avudin l'Rebbe Mason. But according to Rebbe, all situations of avudin are going to die. V'ilu b'Pesach, whereas by Korban Pesach, it's not true in all situations. Heicha da'avad kodem chatzos, for example, if the animal, the original, was lost before chatzos, v'nimsa kodem chatzos, and it was found before chatzos, the halacha is roeh. It is left to graze. So the Gemara answers, kasavar kodem chatzos lav avod, who again, same answer as before chatzos is not considered avod, v'kasavar chatzos kava. And also again, Shmuel is going to hold that it is chatzos that is the koveya, not the shchita. And as Rashi over here points out, that's just an abbreviated version of the discussion. Ela Shmuel kerebi svirale kidle'el ad kamash v'lan chatzos kava. Learn the entire rest of the sugi the same way as the original version. Shmuel holds like Rebbe and proceed all the way till the Gemara concluded that chatzos is koveya according to Shmuel. And the Gemara continues with the Mishnah, hamafresh nekeva lepischo, somebody separates an animal that's a female for Korban Pesach, it's not supposed to be a nekeva, o zocher ben shtei shanim, or it's a male but it's 2 years old. As we said, if it already reaches 2 years old, it's not going to be kosher for Korban Pesach. So the halach is, yira ad sheyisto, if you allow the animal to graze until it develops a mum, v'yimacher v'yiplu damav l'nadav l'shlamim. And then you sell the animal and you use the money for a donation for a carbon shlamim. And Rashi over here says, O Zachar ben Shtei Shanim Deinu Roy LePesach, it's a male, 2 years old, it's not fit for carbon Pesach. Yirad Sheyistoi V'yavi B'dam of Shlamim Dekavate Hafrosha. The separation sets it that it should be a carbon. Ava Bishe Meikaro Dichoyu. Now even though from the beginning it's pushed off, it can't be a carbon Pesach. Hareyu Kekavua Shenidche. It's like an animal that's set to be the carbon and it's pushed off. She'ein Hu Atzmo Karav Shlamim. The animal itself is not brought as a carbon Shlamim. Eladamav. Rather, you use the money to bring a carbon Shlamim, and we'll continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Tzadi Ches Amud Aleph.